Welcome to Spider-Verse Minute, the tri-weekly podcast where we watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 1 minute at a time. I'm Sean Slater.
And I'm his sister Caroline.
And this week we begin with minute 13, opening up with the spider touching down on the ground and finishing a minute later with Miles and his uncle chatting about his dad.
So I'm really proud of what I titled this one. And it's a goofy title, but I'm so proud of it. I titled it Itsy Artsy Spider. I am beyond proud of that title. Just because of the montage of them, cutting back and forth between the two. I loved it, and it felt so perfect.
Yeah, it is a very cool, graffiti montage of them going back and forth and working on the on the art. And I like how his uncle's teaching method where he's careful about holding it there too long, slow down, it's very encouraging but not dictating.
Yeah, we talked about that in the last minute, how he really kind of just lets Miles take control and just gives some feedback in the background. What I also really like about this whole montage, too, with the cutting of the back and forth of the spider, is that I really feel it does a great job of building anticipation.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously Miles is going to get bitten. It focuses on him. It's a Spider-Man movie. The trailers get away, and obviously if you know the comics, he is going to be Spider-Man. He gets bitten. So even if you're not totally, if you know nothing about Miles Morales, it's pretty obvious that, okay, he's going to get bitten at some point. It's just way too obvious. And this cutting back and forth, he's like, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? And that anticipation is probably my favorite thing about this montage. It's oh, he's getting close. Oh, when's he going to do it? It weirdly had me on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, that play between tension and fun is really just is he gonna bite him now? Nope. Okay, he's crawling further up. Oh, nope, he fell off. He keeps going. He keeps going.
Oh, he jumped. Oh, what? Okay, what is he doing it?
Yeah, and when it gets close to his shoe, he's is he gonna step on it? Oh no!
Oh no! This is gonna take a different turn. Yeah, it's such a good montage. Another thing I really like about this montage, little awful differently, but I also just love the effects they do with it. So one of my favorite things they do is that they just have Miles straight up spray painting the screen.
Yeah, the very when you first see it comes out, he covers the screen with that pink with the pink color, and then it cuts to him doing the rest of it, or rest of the wall.
And then there's another part where it's actually, this might be later.
The part where he's painting the wall and it splatters. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's splattering. I loved that. That was the first time I noticed it when I first saw the movie, and I thought it was so cool. I'm I love that.
Yeah.
I also love, this kind of ties in with that. He's standing on Aaron's shoulders when he's spray painting that part, because it's pretty high up.
Yeah.
And I just kind of loved this sort of visual representation of what we've already seen, of just Aaron supporting Miles.
Yeah.
It's just it's a very, I might be reading too much into it, but I personally thought, oh, that's a cool visual of, him supporting his nephew.
Yeah, and it ties back in with the way he's, the way he teaches Miles, or is, teaching him, and at the very end, he adds the finishing touches to help Miles out with I need that line around me, and so that's really cool as well.
I also want to talk, where is it? We kind of talked about it in another minute, but it's again sort of how we talked in a previous minute about just the juxtaposition of the way his dad teaches Miles. Aaron's dad not Aaron's dad, oh my gosh, Miles' dad. Whoops. Wrong family member. What's his dad's name? What's
Jeff.
His dad's name again? Thank you. The way Jeff teaches Miles and the way Aaron teaches Miles. Like, they both teach him, but in two very different ways.
Yeah, and like Miles connects so much easier with Aaron versus like when his dad was trying to just chat with him. It was like, oh, look at
Yeah.
the coffee shop. What is this? A disco? And Miles is
Is
just
that a
like,
coffee shop or a disco?
yeah. And the other cool thing is when we're watching the spider crawl over the paint cans.
Yes, I wrote this.
You go ahead.
Okay, so it never really clicked when I saw the movie like in theaters and stuff, and then like when I was watching this minute the first time, I'm like, wait, that something happened there, and I went back and watched it, and the spider, when it's on like the lids of the cans, on the paint cans, it takes that color. So like when it's at 9 seconds, it's on the pink lid can and it's pink, and then it jumps over to a yellow paint can and it's yellow, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, and it's a really neat like foreshadowing to one of the powers that we see Miles get, where one of the powers that Miles has is camouflage. It's not part of Spider-Man's, or it's not part of Peter Parker's power set.
I was gonna say that's one of the power sets because Miles has. Because I didn't know this for a while. You actually had to explain it to me when I was first starting to read the comics that Miles actually has a different power set than Peter. Or not completely different, but like he has a few different ones.
Yeah.
And that's one of them.
Yeah, a lot of the spider people, usually they'll have slightly different power sets. So like Gwen's in the comics currently, her like suit is made of spiders.
What?
Yeah, it has to do with Venom, and like for a bit there she was Gwenom and kind of went a little dark.
Gwenom, that's the best name ever.
Yeah, they that worked really well for them. But she goes a little dark, and then she kind of like comes to understanding with the symbiote, and it just kind of like chills in her now.
Oh, so she had a Spider-Man 3 sort of.
Yeah.
Did she dance?
No,
did she go
did
goth
not
and dance for a bit?
She did go a little goth, but she's already kind of
I respect that.
Gothy.
Moody.
Yeah, moody.
You're right.
I guess moody's better.
Moody.
In the comics.
She's goth in essence, but not in appearance.
Yeah. And then, so, like, the Venom symbiote's just kind of chilling in her now, and they sort of have an understanding. Like, she's okay with him being in there, but, like, she can not really talk to the spiders, but, like, she's got little Venom spiders that she controls. And
That's awesome.
And then like Silk, who is in this movie, but she went to school with Peter and got bit by the same spider, but like one of her, I don't really know if this would be considered a different power set, but like she just makes her clothing out of spider webs, out of the spider webs that she shoots from her
Spider Silk
body. Yeah, like her name.
Yeah.
And
She's your favorite, right?
No, she's probably my like second and a half favorite, third
Who's
favorite.
Your favorite then? I thought Silk was.
Spider-Gwen.
Oh.
Mostly because I really liked Silk, but her run was canceled, so I've had more Spider-Gwen now.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm just, able to continue enjoying her. I still liked Silk's run.
Silk. Okay.
Yeah. And
anyway,
Miles has the two biggest power difference, different powers that he has compared to like Peter is the camouflage and his Venom Blast, which we see first used later on in the movie, and
I definitely want to talk about that because that is a really cool power. I do like that they show that he does have different power sets. I think it's pretty awesome. Anyway.
So, and like that realization of the spider having kind of showing the different powers, at least
that
with
chameleon
the
effect.
yeah, showing the chameleon power didn't happen until rewatching this minute. So like seeing that scene for maybe the 8th or 9th or 10th time,
Or 20th, depending how
yeah.
many times you rewatch this minute like I do.
And so going through and like, yeah, I finally put that together. I feel a little silly for taking that
I
long.
mean, it didn't hit me until you said it. You're like, oh, it's foreshadowing his powers. I'm like, oh! Like I had my little epiphany there too.
Yeah. At first I thought it was just a like play of the lights, like, oh, the light's reflecting off of the cap, and so
Yeah.
it's shading it pink or orange. But then when I saw, because I only saw it show up on the pink cap, and then when I saw it jump over to the other one, I'm like, oh no, this is clearly just changing colors.
Yeah, well, and like when I didn't realize it was fully changing until I think I said it when I started watching the minute because with these minutes I can actually go in more detail with a lot of it. But like when I saw the entire movie, like it never registered that that's what it was doing to me. Like I think I was just kind of chalked it up to like, oh, my eye's just playing a trick on me or something, like subconsciously. Like I never gave it a second thought.
Yeah, and the scene doesn't dwell on it either. Like it's just like it doesn't like do a zoom in and be like, oh look, it's the spider changing color.
Yeah,
It just
this
it's a
is
very
actually
quick
one of
scene.
the times that the movie is subtle.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the conversation, 'cause
Yeah.
I do want to talk about that because that conversation's awesome. I do want to point out, because you brought it up in the previous minute, that the song mix in the background that accompanies this amazing montage.
Yeah.
We hear more of it. So you said, do you remember how many songs were mixed into this? I know we heard two before.
So there was two very clear songs in that previous minute: the Incredible Bongo Band, Apache, and Black Sheep. The choice is yours. But the article I saw covering it also said Run DMC and Jungle Brothers was mixed in here.
I believe I'm starting to hear more of it in this minute.
Yeah.
Like as it plays, you can definitely hear it's like, okay, yeah, we hear more of it now. So I want a full release of this mix. It's such a good mix.
Yeah, I've only found fan recreations of it. I haven't seen a complete
Official, yeah.
official cut of it. And the other, tying in with that mixing, this scene really plays up like, oh, this is a remix, and it's like sort of a not nod, but like encapsulates what the whole movie is, in that it's a remix of the original Spider-Man, and like how he got his powers, and his origin, and they're taking it, remixing it up, using some of the original stuff, using new stuff.
Using multiple sources.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I didn't think of that. That's a very cool parallel that you came up with. I was thinking it more within the context of the scene, and this kind of segues into the next one, to the conversation of like, it's sort of a remix of what Aaron and Jeff used to do.
Yeah. It's doing it with taking the old stuff and doing it with the new generation.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to touch on before we move into that conversation in regards to the graffiti is that one of the directors, Bob Perschetti, he in the commentary, or in one of the behind the scenes bits, he was talking about how the working on movies takes away from your family for a really long time, and so a lot of times you'll see artists and directors and actors and whatnot put little Easter eggs into about their family, and so he snuck in, as part of the graffiti, the names of his family. And so on the bench that that Miles and Uncle Aaron are sitting on, is you can see the names of you can see the name of his oldest son, Luca, on the bottom of the bench, and then the top part of the bench, there's another bit of graffiti that says Leo, which is his youngest son's name. And then on the barrel that Miles is sitting on, graffitied is Fifi, which is his wife's nickname.
That's really sweet. I like when people do things like that, like they sneak in little references to family or so. And that's not actually the first time that there's been a family referenced in this movie through the director, because in the when Miles was walking to Aaron, what street was referenced?
Oh yeah,
that
Bertinelli or
Bertinelli,
something like that.
that
One of the
his
streets.
dad grew up on.
Yeah,
So it was?
I don't remember
Yeah.
if it was this director or the other director, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I like little things like that. Like, it's cute little shout outs to them, and especially being an artist myself, it's nice to shout out the people who like support you through this, because it's a crazy career, I can tell you that. And speaking of family, we get some more and supporting family. We get some revelations about Aaron and his relationship with Jeff, with Miles's dad. It's revealed here, and I want to go back a little bit and talk about the mural, but first I want to talk about this. Aaron tells Miles that, he and Jeff used to do stuff like this all the time back in the day. Miles doesn't believe him.
Yeah. He definitely, like, Miles sees his dad as just sort of, the straight-laced cop, and that's really all he knows about him. And
Goody two-shoes.
And you can tell that Aaron, misses the connection that he used to have with his brother. And, like, he says, like, he's a good guy, just... You can tell that, like, he kind of, looks up to his brother and recognizes...
He respects him.
Yeah. I guess that's better. Is he respects
Yeah.
the decisions that he made for him, and, understands that it definitely was, better for Jeff to do what he did to bring up, Miles, and that what he does really isn't the best for raising a family.
Yeah. And I do have to point this out in a little more lighthearted sense, but just because I found it a little funny. The minute ends right after Aaron says, he's a good guy, just, and then it ends.
Yeah.
So I
it's like,
wrote in
"Just
my notes,
what?"
just what? Just what? What is he?
He's just broccoli. He's just
He's a good guy, just, it's like, what is he?
It's kind of like whenever someone's like, I'm not racist, but, and you're like,
Yeah,
he's a
it's
good
like
guy,
that.
just or I just picture him be like, he's a good guy, just he's a narc. Like, but
He's a good guy, just no, it's like, he's a good guy, just boring. Like, just, there's a little shade in there or something. Yeah, that just yeah, no, I found that very funny at the minute ended. But to go back in a more serious note, yeah, I love this moment, and shout out to his voice actor here. There's a few shout outs in the next few minutes to the voice actors, because it's such a simple line, but he put so many layers into it through just the read that it's, and the animators also with the facial expressions help as well. But there's no, like, they don't have music in the background to help, like, to, hammer in the emotion. It very is just relied on the animation and his line read, and it matches up so beautifully that you can feel the weight of the line.
Yeah, and the animator commentary, they were talking about how coming up to this scene, or like when they finally got kind of around to this part, animating this part, they were having difficulty like figuring out Miles and like figuring out who he was and how, him as a, like, what his essence was. But then when they started working on this scene and like found out like, oh, he's an artist and like this is what a big part of the story is, the story makes a lot more sense now. And once they had this done, they were able to like, okay, yeah, this is a lot not, easier speaking,
We
but
get the
relatively
character.
speaking, it makes this a lot easier to do. And they do
Yeah.
do a good job of doing the expressions here and getting across what the characters are feeling.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those moments where I feel the animators get to really show off just the detail they can do.
Yeah, and the scene was pretty consistent. Like how this scene was supposed to play out throughout the whole process is they knew that they wanted this, remix graffiti scene and then have like the conversation with Uncle Aaron.
Mm-hmm. Um, if you don't mind, since you brought up him being an artist, I do want to talk about the mural he makes.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful mural, but like the big emphasis is the word is no expectations. The words highlighted are no expectations, and then there is an outline of Miles, like right in the middle, which is probably my favorite part of the mural. Just super quick, off the cuff. And it's you talk about it a little bit because I just it every time I see it, I get a little speechless with it.
It really expresses what Miles is like feeling inside. Like the even though all of these expectations are placed on him, he really doesn't want any of them placed on him, and he's like trying to deflect those expectations, and like you said previously, like the theme with Peter Parker is always responsibility, whereas the theme with Miles is expectations, and what's expected of him, and he wants no expectations, and to be able to try to like perform how he feels like he should perform and not necessarily how other people expect him to perform.
The work definitely going off of that, the work definitely sort of shows it's like he just wants to be able to be a kid and to like make mistakes and not have it be so impactful in a way. And the way I'm kind of getting that just looking at the mural now I'm getting into my art reading here is that pink in the background is it's very typical graffiti with all of the circles and stuff, but it's also in a very much like explosive sort of way as well.
Yeah, and across the whole thing, there's just this black, outline like blotch of Miles, it covering up the whole thing. Like, oh, that the word expectations is being covered up by Miles as he's like trying to cover
Yeah.
up the expectations that other people have of him.
Right in the center. I love one thing I do especially love too, and they kind of bring it up where like Uncle Aaron at one point is like, "Gotta keep it moving with the drips," and Miles responds, "That's intentional," which I
Yeah.
just love that little back and forth during the montage. But the outline of Miles done in white, it's intentionally like dripping, like you can see the paint running down the wall, and it gives a very cool, almost worn battle effect.
This ties in really well with one of the alternate scenes that they had, that I hadn't talked about in a previous minute, but it takes place in between when Miles looks out of his window and goes to Uncle Aaron's apartment. Instead of him immediately going to Uncle Aaron's apartment, he actually travels back to his house. And so what it does is the scene starts with like a news story about Spider-Man, battling another super, and it's a live broadcast. And there's a line about the Bureau of Superhero Regulatory Affairs, covering the growing controversy of supers fighting each other, and his dad walks in through the door and is showing more display, and he's like, oh, the boys in blue are the real heroes, and he says things like, oh, I'm gonna arrest the next person who mentions superheroes. And he walks into the kitchen of Rio making dinner, and she's like, oh, perfect timing, dinner's about done. And he's like, yum, my favorite. Or the food smells really good. And then Rio says, oh, it's Iron Man's favorite. And then Jeff starts flirting a bit with Rio, and she's like, "Oh, careful, we have a special guest." And then he turns around and sees Miles sitting there, and he's like, really happy to see him. But then Miles says he's got an important announcement that he's gonna quit Vision and go back to Brooklyn Middle. And then both of his parents' demeanors changes drastically, and they're like, "Nope." And Jeff or Rio says like, "Oh, well, are you making this decision unilaterally? I have some thoughts on this. What about you, Jeff?" And Jeff is, "I have a lot of thoughts, which is why I'm not saying any of them." And
Sorry, that's a very Jeff line.
yeah, and he's like starting to eat his dinner a lot more angrily. And then Miles is like, "Well, I'm never going to succeed, and so I made a difficult personal decision to give up trying, and I think I'm very brave doing that." And Jeff is just seething. And his mom goes, "Nobody quits in this house." And Miles just, shoots back, "There's a first for everything." And Jeff is like, "Well, if you're going to quit, you might as well quit doing that graffiti before I arrest you for it." And the Miles is like, "Oh, are you the fun police?" And Jeff just outbursts, "I'm the doggone commissioner of the fun police." And he's
Okay.
like, "Well, maybe I'll save my fun for when I quit school and move in with Uncle Aaron." And then both of his parents just look like completely shocked. And Miles realizes like, "Oh, that wasn't the right thing to say." And so that's when he gets up and leaves. And then that scene ends and it cuts to Uncle Aaron dropping his needle on the vinyl record.
Wow, that scene was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
That scene is such a roller coaster. I was laughing at it, but like I was trying to imagine it in context, like fully animated and stuff.
Yeah.
And I can see it having a much more serious tone. And even with those lines, like laughing and stuff, I said this earlier with like, the other alternate scene, where this one's a little different. I'm glad they didn't go with this one. Where the other one, I'm like, it would have been cool to see his roommate be more involved. It would have been awesome and stuff, but I'm kind of glad they didn't do it. This one, I'm like, I'm really glad they didn't go. I don't think I would have wanted to see this, to be honest.
I think it makes sense in it adds extra fluff to the way the story is told. Like it still works as part of the story.
Yeah.
And the kind of makes sense as to why, it ties in with why, okay, Miles went back to his family because, he's feeling stressed, but then he, his parents don't help, so then he goes to his uncle. So he's kind of trying to connect with his, mom and dad, but like it's just not quite there, whereas with his uncle he's a lot more relaxed.
Yeah.
And so it helps set up that juxtaposition more, and I think it helps ties in where like with this minute where Uncle Aaron's like, "Oh yeah, your dad used to be like this," and he's like, "No, stop lying," because he just would have had that interaction earlier in the day with his dad being like, "No fun."
Yeah, it would have done that, but it also, seeing how the movie has turned out, it does feel very unneeded.
Yeah,
Because they set up Jeff so well in the earlier minute with the whole "I love you," and especially that sequence before that when he's like, "Look, we all make choices in life." Miles is like, "Well, I don't feel like I have a choice," and he just snaps back, "You don't." Like that alone, I feel does such a great job of setting up the juxtaposition that this almost maybe would have made his dad a little too much of a bad guy.
I think that earlier scene did a good enough job that this one just was
Yeah.
like reiterating what we already knew, kind of.
I think it might have just picturing it in my head and hearing some of those lines, like I could see people turning against Jeff a little bit there. It's like, oh my gosh, he's so overbearing. He's so stubborn and stuck in his ways that it almost, I don't think it would have made him irredeemable, but it would have been very hard for people to sympathize with him again.
Yeah, I can see that. They would have had to do a little bit extra work in the back end to make his sort of redemption near the end of the movie a little bit more palatable. If this would have this scene would have happened, and I'm not I'm watching the alternate scenes as we're going through the movie, so I don't know if they have extra scenes in there that make this, if this one would have been in, and then the other ones would have been in as well, if that redemption would have been there.
And I'm not watching the alternate scenes at all. I'm going based off what you tell me.
Yeah. There was two other neat world building things in this movie, or in this scene, that I thought was really interesting.
In the alternate scene or in this minute?
In the alternate scene.
Okay.
That I just want to touch on real quick, and it's
Okay.
the Bureau of Superhero Regulatory Affairs.
Yeah, I did catch on to that. I'm like, oh, please talk about that. But I'm like, you kept going. I'm like, I'll wait till he's done with the alternate scene to ask about that.
Yeah. And it makes sense that there is some sort of, like, they always gloss over the, like, actual legal implications of what superheroes do in most movies and comics. Not all of them. There are a couple that touch on it. But a lot of times it's just like, oh, vigilantes are okay?
Yeah.
And, like,
X-Men kind of brushes on it every now and again.
Yeah. The Civil War comic really touched on it, and then the movie sort of touched on it a little. Like, they didn't go into as deep, and then the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. really goes into it a lot more after Civil War.
I could see Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. doing it, but I wonder if it's also maybe just a little harder to put in film, like in a movie. Like, again, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. can do it in a TV show, but I wonder if it's just harder to do in, like, a movie.
I think they could have definitely done it in a movie. It would have... To do that whole Civil War storyline, though, they would almost have to wait until, like, instead of doing the Infinity War Endgame movies, they would have had to do, like, a Civil War storyline instead, because of the way that storyline goes in the comics. It's, like, all of the superheroes against each other sort of thing. And at that point, Civil War was, like, 15 people fighting each other in the movies, and so it wasn't as big of a it didn't have that same sense of scale that they could have done, whereas
it did at the time in the movie.
they did a scaled down version of it, but it would be a lot harder. There's a lot more building up to it, I think, that you have to do to make it a bit more palatable in a movie.
Yeah, I sort of cut you off totally explaining what it was, but
that's all they have. So
that it's sort of just like a policing of the.
I have no idea. This is all speculation. The only thing I have is their name.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like something like that was actually in the comics.
So in the comics, they don't have, like, the closest thing I can think of to this, going strictly based off of the name, is in that Civil War storyline where the Superhero Registration Act passes, and we touched on this briefly in the previous minute, and I guess I'll go into a bit more depth here, but pretty much what happened was, in the storyline, Captain America and Iron Man are on opposing sides of this conflict, where Iron Man thinks that superheroes should register because and the government should know who has powers and who doesn't, because there was an incident where there was this, like, TV show with that was following some, like, young superheroes, and one of them, like, they try to film it near I don't know if it's near a school, but wherever they're filming, like, the guy pretty much goes, like, nuclear, and it causes this explosion, and it, like, just decimates a whole school. And so there's like, a couple hundred children that are killed, and that's, like, the big turning point of, like, okay, we need people with powers who are using, pretty much anybody with powers needs to be registered so we can track them and keep tabs on them. And, like, the storyline has this whole sort of, like, oh, we need to, register people coming into this country, so we know, where the good guys are and the bad guys are, kind of thing. And Captain America is against that because he believes that it'll be used, against people, which it touches on the political issues of, like, facial recognition software and stuff. And it wasn't this storyline is from the mid 2000s, I believe.
Okay.
So pre 2010, and so it's not as those sort of issues weren't in the forefront of everyone's mind as they are today. But yeah, so in this universe with the Bureau of Superhero Regulatory Affairs, I feel like it might be something a little bit similar, maybe not necessarily where people have to register, because they don't seem to mind too much that like this new Spider-Man shows up and they're not like, oh, you're unregistered, but they also kind of, would have cut that out. But
Yeah.
it seems more like, okay, this is how we're
That's
gonna,
for the sequel, Sean.
yeah. It could be more like, this is how the police should deal with superpowered, crime, and maybe placing like limits on what superheroes can do that they don't necessarily like have to register for, but like, okay, if you're a superpowered person, these are the rules you need to follow where we won't come after you. And even if, not everybody's agrees with it.
This hearing it does sound like something that would fit perfectly into an X-Men storyline, but I think it's because X-Men does, like, from the moment of their creation, they've always been sort of that dealt with like prejudice and being different.
They've been the stand-in for the others
race
at the time.
For like so it definitely feels like an X-Men sort of storyline, but it would be interesting to see, like, it be tackled with Spider-Man or Thor or...
Yeah, I think it ties in pretty well with, like, the Avengers, because they've always been, not always, but they're usually a extrajudicial sort of thing. Like, they don't usually work with the government, whereas, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. has always been, government affiliated. Or at least had the air of government affiliation, and so tying those things in with that stuff.
Yeah, I think it would be a little hard, like you said when we talked about it with Civil War. Like, it would need to be a lot of build up with it. But I do think it would be possible and an interesting element.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if in any sequels or spinoffs, if they kind of bring some of these deleted ideas back in, or if they just don't touch on them at all. Because the other thing they mention is Iron Man, and so like, are there the other Avengers, are they around? Like, do we have a Captain America as well? And
now I really want to see Miles with the Avengers.
Yeah,
that sounds like an amazing idea.
And there is a point where in the comics where he does join the Avengers. For a brief period in the current storylines, but then he ends up like leaving because it's him, Miss Marvel, and Nova, Sam something or another. I forget his last name, but they're like the three they're teenagers, and they join the Avengers for a bit, and then they kind of quit the Avengers because they're tired of feeling as just like not appreciated enough, kind of. But
I don't know, I just pictured Miles with like the current Avengers, and I just pictured him with Ant-Man.
Yeah, he would really get along with.
No, he I feel like he would get along great with Ant-Man. I totally just had this image pop into my head. I just pictured Miles teaching Ant-Man how to spray paint, like doing art and stuff, and then Ant-Man getting really tiny and doing these like tiny graffitis all over.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like
the Avengers Tower and stuff. Like, just different places, like, I'm gonna spray paint this tiny, like, I think that's hilarious. Who else would Miles really get along with the current Avengers?
I mean, him in the comics, him and Miss Marvel have a really good I really like their relationship in the comics.
I could see that.
They're really close friends in there, and it's always fun when they do things like in the one of the current stories I'm reading, it's Marvel Rising, and him, Miss Marvel, Miles, Miss Marvel, and then a couple other heroes, they go to I forget if it's like Empire U or it's one of their made up New York universities for a like tour given by Squirrel Girl, and it's really neat to see like the different worries that they have going into college.
No, you know what I would love to see? Like, it would be hard to do, but I think it'd be so cool. This Miles with the current with the Tom Holland Peter Parker.
Yeah, they would definitely like. I could
That
see.
would be
I could see Miles trying
like,
to be cool and being like trying to
like he
trying
would
to
be
play
the
too
smoother
cool.
one of the two. I'm just saying that right now. He would be.
Yeah, and I guess Tom Holland's Peter Parker is 2 years older.
Oh yeah, because he's in
A year
high
older.
school.
No,
right?
he's only a year older. Yeah, because
okay.
he's in ninth
That would
grade.
be amazing. Could you
Yeah.
imagine that? Like, I can just picture the Tom Holland Peter be like, he has different powers, and then what's his friend's name? Ned.
Yeah, Ted and like Genki, because they're pretty much
Yeah.
just the same character, kind of.
Oh no, I'm not even picturing like Genki in there too. I'm just picturing like just Ned. I thought his name was Ned. Is it Ted?
Oh yeah, it's Ned, not
yeah,
Ted.
it's Ned. Ned being like, dude, he's got invisibility, like just totally freaking out, and Peter's just like, I don't know how to react to any of this, and Miles is just like, what's up?
Yeah.
I feel like it would be like a superhero version of the Three Stooges.
Yeah.
I think it would be great. Oh, there was another world building thing on the you wanted to talk about.
No,
or
it
was it the Iron?
it was just
Iron Man.
Iron Man. And the
Okay.
fact that there was other heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all I have for this minute. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, that covers all of what I have for this minute as well.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for joining us for minute 13. We'll see you guys on Wednesday for where we pick up with minute 14 and end up this conversation and see what happens next.
It's gonna be exciting. See you guys next time.
Bye.